Our chalice lighting is a reminder of everything it takes to start again. For every time we make a mistake and decide to remain one another's people, we light this chalice. For every time we are lonely and are vulnerable enough to let someone in, we light this chalice. For every time we are disappointed and we choose once again to hope, we light this chalice. Oh, hold on, prelude.
Good morning. Love is the spirit of this place, and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We find these words in one form or the other in hymns and songs, covenants and prayers throughout our shared progressive faith and beyond. Because so much of what we do centers these foundational truths. We welcome the spirit of service. We welcome the depth of truth. We welcome the toiling and never-ending work of building peace. And this morning, we welcome you here in the spirit of love. Perhaps as a traveler in for the holiday, getting ready to head back home to the daily grind, or perhaps this is your home. We gather knowing that this is a place of community, spirit, and service where we arrive fully with our unique mix of joys and sorrows, gifts and growing edges, ready to continue this blessed and sacred journey of being human together. At any point during this service, you're invited to come and light a candle for the joys and sorrows that arrived with you today, to light a candle for the hopes you are carrying in your heart, or to simply be here with what is and to co-create this space. What a joy it is to be in blessed and beloved community together this morning. Come, let us worship.
Shwai. month at River Road, we gather together around a theme in our worship life, in our religious education, in our time together. And though we are poised here, now that the leftovers are tucked into the fridge and perhaps we have not yet purchased our Christmas trees in a leaning toward December, we are still in November, a month of generosity here at River Road. For all the ways in which generosity has expressed itself in our lives in this month and in our community, we are grateful. And I want to lift up one more opportunity for a profound generosity to close out November and tumble us headlong into December. Specifically, it is the time of giving and a time of receiving. And for many, many years, in fact, decades, we have both given and received great gifts to two communities, Beacon House, a community program at the very core of our faith in Washington, D.C., that provides opportunity to learn, grow, to play, to enjoy childhood with and among children here in Washington, D.C., and La Clínica del Pueblo, which provides such essential medical resources to partners in faith and community in Columbia Heights. You can, this very day, go out and see our brand new gift list from the kids at Beacon House. Usually we don't get specific gifts from them that are requested, but you know how it goes if you randomly buy some kid in your life a gift you think they'll want? Not great. So this year our partners at Beacon House have given us a whole list, and there are a whole lot of GameStop gift cards requested. So today, before you leave, please consider signing up, bringing your gift and dropping it in the box, and you can find out more about how to give and support our friends at La Clínica del Pueblo as well. In a season of generosity, today's service is about what it takes to be generous with our spirits, to be generous with the expansion and extension of our hearts, to be generous with our empathy, even when such empathy brings us pain, to make space for one another in the good times and in the hard. I want to invite you, as you are willing and able, to rise for our opening hymn. It is, in fact, hymn number one in our hymnal that was sung at the dedication of this space and is sung at the dedication of so many new sanctuaries in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. It's a bit of a slow one, so sing it as a hymn of blessing. Please rise in body or in spirit. The lyrics will be right up there on the wall. What does it take to keep hate out, to hold love in? It takes a knowledge of our interconnection that asks something bold of us, something lasting. In years gone by, a little man named Mohandas K. Gandhi understood that if we were to keep each other safe, we needed, first of all, to understand our interconnection. Gandhi created a practice in his own life of erasing the distinctions between people and the various forms of dress that divide us or choose to show what class or caste we might be from. Gandhi himself chose to wear a simple garment of homespun cloth, which he made himself on a spinning wheel he carried with him everywhere he went. That single, simple garment represented to him the interwoven threads of a community of the world in which each was important and which each was necessary for the strength and the warmth of the whole. There was no greater student of Mahatma Gandhi than the great Dr. Martin Luther King. And when Dr. Martin Luther King chose to write his own thesis in his graduate studies, it was on the nonviolent resistance work of Gandhi, and one of the great breakthrough books that Dr. King wrote was titled simply, An Interconnected Single Garment of Destiny, inspired by his teacher, by the one who guided him. Dr. King then wrote a famous letter from the Birmingham jail that told us just what it meant to him to be one another's people, woven by homespun cloth we make with our own hands to keep each and every one of us warm.
I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly.
I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. Here we are, connected, interrelated, whole only if and when we choose to help one another be whole, uplifted only when and if we choose to grieve and to celebrate together.
Thanksgiving has passed, and now we find ourselves entering into yet another holiday season. And of course, the holidays can bring up a lot of stuff for a lot of us, perhaps joy and wonder at times, longing and remembrance of how things once were at other times, and for some of us, indifference. All that stirs within us is a gift and is a message. And all that stirs in our hearts is worth the space that it takes up. This morning, we light a candle of gratitude for that of which we give thanks in our lives, for all the shapes and forms that family can take, whether that be family of origin or chosen family, families of all shapes and sizes and configurations, families that are fractured, families that are creating new ways of being whole. We light a candle of recognition and solidarity with the Nacotchtank and Piscataway people, the original peoples of this land on which we live and work each and every day, and the gratitude for this community's work as of reparations and also work of repair. We light a candle for the ongoing conflicts and struggles and wars in our shared global village. A candle of hope and grief and remembrance and longing. longing for a world where life is valued and protected, where we give life to one another rather than to take it away. And now I invite you into a place and a space of inner stillness and presence, perhaps planting your feet firmly on the ground, getting into a space that's comfortable for your body and your needs, perhaps lowering your gaze or trusting the space and closing your eyes. Our blessing this morning comes from one of my favorite poets, John O'Donohue, and this is a blessing for presence. May you awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May you have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. May you receive great encouragement when new frontiers beckon. May you respond to the call of your gift and find the courage to follow its path. May the flame of anger free you from falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame and anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of the soul. May you take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. May you be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. May it be so.
We are not, as a practice, heavy-handed, arm-twisty demanders of generosity in this place. We are, however, tellers of truths, including the truth that we are what we are because we choose to create this place together. There are so many ways to express generosity in community, ways both financial and beyond. And in this time of offering, as the music plays and we are blessed once again with Shwai's remarkable gifts, you're invited to, of course, come forward and continue to light those candles for what lies in the sanctuary of your heart. And you're invited as you are willing and able to give. There's a box in the back. Baskets will go around. You can text to give 73256 with the amount that you'd like to share, and you can give online. So many expressions of generosity are a way not just of giving our money, but of saying, I believe in the people to the right of me, to the left of me, the people with whom I share this community. What an honor it is to give and to receive. What is it that knits us together? What are the actual threads of this single garment of destiny in which we are so poetically and prophetically intertwined? In this season of Thanksgiving, many among us, if we are very, very lucky and enormously blessed, are woven and rewoven together by traditions and by memory, by the practice of being and becoming family to one another through the holiday season and everything it brings. We're woven together by the meals shared, not only this year, but in all the years before, the promise of years to come. We are woven together by a mutual appreciation of the passage of time and its wonder, by each child stretching 3 brand new inches taller, long legs shoved awkwardly under the card tables set up to expand the places around which we gather. We are woven together by the photos passed from hand to hand of those we have loved and have lost. We knit the fabric of our interconnection in this way, by the practices of community life, by the longing for it, strengthening each and all, knowing that this bond that holds us close is in fact held by more than just our celebration. It's held by more than just our gratitude. In a very real sense, this single garment of destiny we share, it is held together in our families, in our communities, in our nations, in our nation states, in this world, most powerfully by the connective tissue of our shared grief, and longing for a better world. There are stories that only your specific family knows. There are losses that only your closest friends can truly honor alongside you. There are passages in our lives that not only can be shared, but must be shared, because it is in the loss and in the remembrance that we are known to one another, and that we are reminded of every single thing that is at stake if those bonds fray, and of everything we are called to bless while still we can bless it together. And so every holiday, every meal, every tradition, every worship service, and yes, every deep and abiding sorrow is an act of weaving. These are the threads out of which community forms itself into something more resilient for all that lies ahead. And it's true, of course, not only in our family settings, where our grief and our yearning and the passage of what was, the yearning for what will be, knits us together. This is true not only in our family settings, but across all the borders and the boundaries, religious identities, and even across the dangerous walls of historic and profound enmity. We are woven together by the tears we shed. We are woven together when and how we are willing to shed those tears as one. We are connected from our scattered places by the extent of our ability to feel alongside one another, even when the feeling of it all is very, very hard. The bonds are formed by tradition and memory, and the bonds are frayed when we forget that we are one another's people, bound to one another's grief. My pondering of this garment of destiny, held together by grief and by gratitude, it was prompted this month by a story I heard from my amazing colleague, Rabbi Sharon Bruce, about a time when the bonds were formed and frayed in the most sacred places of her community. Each spring, Rabbi Bruce says, Israel honors a national holiday known as Remembrance Day, like Memorial Day here in the States, but deeper and more vulnerable and raw, of necessity more immediate, not removed from the losses by oceans or by years. On Remembrance Day, she preached to her congregation, the whole of the nation shuts down to grieve what they have lost in war and in violence. And for many, many years, for an expanding set of decades, on this sacred day of remembrance, a single ceremony has taken place in the bustling heart of Tel Aviv, a ceremony that knits together the soul of the people tier by tier, story by story. In this ceremony in which thousands gather, the work of an organization founded across religious and ideological identities, Israeli Jews gather alongside Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinians living in the West Bank for a simple yet powerful act on that day of remembrance of sharing their grief instead of hoarding it along borders and barriers of nations and identities. The idea behind it, Rabbi Bruce said, is that if we are going to live as neighbors, we have to learn how to share our grief. And so this simple act of sorrow becomes a loom that weaves, a means, however painful, of creating a shared future. If we cannot grieve together, she said, the wisdom holds that we cannot even begin to live together. This past spring in May, which means way, way before the violence in the morning hours of October 7th. Last May, this past spring, when Remembrance Day came along, before the bombs rained down on Gaza, before this too brief pause in the fighting, long before any hostages were taken or released on this Thanksgiving weekend, when the fabric was already frayed, straining, pulled to a tension that the people could barely hold, last May, amid so much, the people gathered in that same space as they have gathered in years past to grieve in the way that reminds them that grief knows no nationality. A Palestinian man from Jenin spoke of his little brother, just 5 years old, who died when he darted like a bullet out of his front door, fleeing from IDF soldiers in abject terror of what appeared to his young eyes to be monsters. A professor from Tel Aviv spoke of his sister, a young newlywed in the 90s during the Second Intifada, when a bomb blew up the bus she was riding in downtown Tel Aviv. Both spoke of the black hole that opened up in the wake of these losses. These and more families told their stories, which began one by one to feel less separated, less divided from one another, peering together into an abyss only those who have felt it can understand. Loss is loss. Grief is grief. One in being, one in dying, one in choosing to live together in different ways. These, said Rabbi Bruce when telling the story, are the people in this who have lost the most and who are willing to stand together to offer their stories as a testament not only to what they have lost, but to what they hope can be recovered, which is some kind of shared humanity in the darkness. And yet this year, in May, in the springtime of 2023, even before the violence of this fall, when these thousands of people gathered for this reweaving ritual, just as they have done every year in Tel Aviv, somehow even shared grieving was taken by some as evidence of political statement. Somehow even this act of simply remembering together was too much for a fractured society, and the interfaith honoring of Remembrance Day last May was drowned out by protesters surrounding the gathering, honking horns and screaming, doing everything they could to drown out the words of the speakers. Israeli Jews and Palestinian Israeli citizens of the West Bank all gathered to grieve what they had lost and hold out hope for the future, and yet some others beyond that sacred circle were so threatened by the very idea that grief could be shared across the borders of their identities that their only possible response was to shut it down at all costs. If every life, every memory, every hope cut short is what we have lost as families, as individuals, and as communities, this to me is representative of what we have lost as nations, as networks of nations, as political entities in an ever more polarized world. This is what we have lost. The assumption that interconnection, the garment of destiny that holds us, the assumption that any of it is worth weaving at all, the assumption that anything, including grief and by extension humanity, exists beyond our barriers, this is what we have lost. The fraying of that fabric of community comes not just with each successive loss and death and tragedy across the world or near to home, but with the growing assumption that such a fabric is in fact better shredded than protected, the growing assumption that diverse democracies big enough to share each other's destiny, each other's pain, are somehow a relic of a former age, the growing assumption that thickening the bonds that hold us close is somehow just another form of conspiring with the enemy, or wasting our resources, or betraying our ever smaller circles of allegiance. And this turn toward ideological extremism, it is of course not exclusive to some other places somewhere else. It is certainly not exclusive to the places we know as the Near East. Across this world, right here at home, the rise of right-wing populism and national isolationism grows. Even just this week in the Netherlands, the election of another dramatically hateful right-wing populist happens in the midst of so much progress. Today, the very idea of interconnection is up for debate, and the forces gather not to re-knit what has frayed, but to convince us that we were never, never all one another's people in the first place. Sometimes it can be hard to find the words to counter such ideological disdain for the very idea of a shared destiny. Sometimes, when there are no words, it is a good thing that at least there are ancient metaphors too, stories we can work with until the right words come In the mystical Jewish tradition, the origin story of all creation says that the very first thing, the thing before all other things, before any of our ideas, before any of us, before all of our imaginings, was a vast, whole, unified, great blanket of darkest, most luminous night. Until from that darkness there burst a light so bright the whole sky couldn't hold it, a light that splintered into diamond bright shards. What was meant to be unified got scattered in that moment to the furthest reaches of creation, and it landed not just as the stars in the heavens, but inside each of us, inside the events and the people and the creatures and the stories we tell each other. The stars landed in our own souls. And when something has been spilled apart like that, when something once whole has been cracked and torn asunder, no matter what that something is, a fabric of interconnection, the light of creation, when something that is meant to be together has been so dramatically pulled apart, somebody has got to come along and reconnect the pieces. Which brings us to our work as human beings, as moral actors, or at least as people who aspire to be moral actors in this world. In the origin story of the Kabbalah, we are the ones tasked with picking up the pieces and uniting them again. We are the ones who repair the world, not by finding the right words, but by noticing the shards of the sacred wherever they have landed. Our work is to repair the world, says this ancient wisdom. Nothing more, nothing less. And how deeply intimidating, how absolutely impossible that sounds right about now. So difficult one might be tempted, as truly I am, to throw in the towel before one even gets started with all the repairing, because why? When it is such a god-awful mess should we even begin? We are worried and we are anxious in these days. And not just about how the heck we're supposed to solve things in a broken and polarized world, but about just how powerless we often feel before it and how vulnerable. Repairing the world, reweaving the fabric of our interconnection. Sometimes it feels like the work of some other person, some smarter, more energetic one, someone with more power and capacity and access to a whole lot of cash, you name it, something more than we have in our hearts. And yet the ancient stories tell us that it is the work of us all individually and collectively. It is, in fact, why we exist. So what does reweaving take? This bringing together of the frayed ends of our interconnection. What does it take, even in the presence of forces that are ideologically designed to tear us apart into ever more isolated pockets of protectiveness? It takes expertise and skill and power and the movement of massive systems, yes. It takes political change, yes. It takes massive amounts of money and the organizational power to move that money in directions that make life possible instead of death, yes. But to move those systems, to move that money, to elect those leaders, to find those leaders, we first have to move people. And to move people, we first have to care about people. And to care about people, we first have to know them deeply in our souls as sacred. You cannot save a world you do not love. You cannot fight for the humanity of a person you do not perceive as worthy. So maybe we can start right there. Seeing the sparks of the holy, the stars that have landed in one another's hearts, no matter what. This is, in fact, come what may, a central doctrine of Unitarian Universalist theology. Worth that does not have to be earned. Dignity that is not granted as a concession on the part of anybody else's negotiation. A spark that was there before the beginning that is in each of us, no matter what we do or do not do, no matter how scared we are, no matter how powerless we feel. There is not one single soul who doesn't carry the spark of the holy inside of them, no matter where, no matter what, and no government, no power or principality or system of oppression or economics could be more powerful than that simple spark of God's light we carry into every situation. And so, the old story and the actual theology we carry with us tells us that we are the artists of creation. We are the ones who take light and turn it into words and images and love songs and political campaigns. We are the artists, noticing something sacred and passing it on so that others might perceive its light too. Fragment after fragment, we are the ones who gather up what has been scattered. And maybe, I hope, you or I don't have to understand all the ins and outs of Middle East peace policy, though frankly some of you in this room very much do. Maybe you don't have to know personally how to reweave the whole frayed garment. Maybe you just have to start by celebrating someone else's joy, giving thanks for someone else's happiness, and grieving, truly, deeply grieving someone else's pain. These are the weaver's tools. These are instruments in the craft of interconnection, and they are the same tools that the weavers have always had. Traditions and celebrations, artistry and craft, shared tears and the acknowledgement of suffering, the knowledge that such suffering does not stop at international borders, and most of all, the greatest tool we have, hearts big enough to hold it all. There are threads of relationship that emerge from the midst of despair. There are shards of the holy that can only be perceived when we come together. And we are caught. We are caught by all that is sacred and by one another in that inescapable network of mutuality, whether we like it or not. We are knit together day by day in the hope that we might remember truly that what affects one directly, this in every day, affects all indirectly. As in the days gone by, those tools of reweaving remain the same. One garment, one destiny, one great and abiding grief, one people called to reunite all that has been broken. Thank you, Shuai, an arrangement by some guy named Cliff of that amazing, beautiful piece of music. What we do together, we do because we choose to create something in community. And today, I also want to offer thank you to Khaki Power. Khaki, are you out there? There you are, who does our flowers, bringing a little bit of beauty to us every week. And also, of course, the tech team, as always, like, I don't even know what we would do. We've got Dave and Marcia, Ajay and Danny doing their thing with such graciousness. Ajay was in here at like 8 a.m. moving the piano. We make it happen together. There are a few things that I want to lift up about ways that you can connect and be involved in our work here in community, knowing that the best way, since I often get the announcements wrong in some subtle form, is to read your e-weekly newsletter where all the announcements will in fact be correct. But I do my best to lift up a few things on Sunday morning. One is our incredible statewide action with Action in Montgomery, which is our broad-based interfaith community organizing network that we're a part of. Community organizers are the reweavers, people who bring together our entire network across Montgomery County, across religious lines, across race and class, and every kind of boundary to work for the people's priorities. Our AIM action is focusing on issues that are important to the people of Montgomery County and important to the state of Maryland, namely healthcare, housing, and climate. So you can join Action in Montgomery on Tuesday, December 5th. It'll be from 7 to 8:30 for our first ever Maryland statewide action, working with our legislators to make a difference on these important issues. It's going to be at Good Hope Union United Methodist Church in Silver Spring. Liz Purcell, who might be here, is organizing carpool. Reach out to Liz. You can find out more in the e-weekly. And I believe Linda Bleedingheiser has some pamphlets, so you can find out more. Linda is right in the back. It is some of the most important work that we can possibly do. Bring the people together to elevate the people's voices. Also, following a really fantastic presentation by Larissa Johnson of the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection on November 12th, we are expanding our work with our Earth Ministry programs. You can visit an Earth Ministry table from 11 to 12 on all the first 3 Sundays of December and find out more about Montgomery County's efforts to electrify everything to help your home and your life get a little greener, and how to advocate for our county to make large systemic changes for sustainability. Finally, if you're interested in exploring a little bit more of the spiritual aspects of what underpins Unitarian Universalist faith and identity, we want to invite you to a series of conversations about what's called Article 2, which is some of the foundational language of Unitarian Universalist theology and identity. We'll have a 4-session program that we offered last year about how Unitarian Universalism is grappling with these questions and issues that will be voted on at General Assembly in 2024. This class will be led by Beth Irakura. It'll be on Wednesdays on Zoom in the evening, and the next session I think will start off in January. It is a gift to ask big questions in beloved community. And finally, with all of this before us, and so much trying our hearts and pulling our souls both apart and together, we take this light we have kindled out into the waiting world. May the truths that make us free, the love that casts out fear, and the hope that never dies guide us and those we love and those we do not love forward together till the day spring breaks and all the shadows flee away. Amen.